Caregiving can sometimes feel like an impossible struggle. Caregivers may be torn between taking care of loved ones and trying to maintain balance in life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. The Caring Generation with host Pamela D Wilson is here to focus on the conversation of caring. You're not alone. In fact, you're in exactly the right place to share stories and learn tips and resources to help you and your loved ones. So now, please welcome the host of The Caring Generation, Pamela D Wilson.
This is Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, speaker, consultant, and guardian of the Caring Generation. The Caring Generation focuses on the conversation of caring, giving us permission to talk about aging, the challenges of caregiving, and everything in between. It's no surprise that needing care or becoming a caregiver changes everything. The Caring Generation is here to guide you along the journey, to let you know that you're not alone. You are in exactly the right place to share stories and learn about caregiving programs and resources to help you and your loved ones plan for what's ahead. Invite your parents, spouses, family, friends, colleagues, co-workers, and everyone you know to listen to the show. If you have a question or an idea for a future program, share your idea with me by commenting on my social media posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also go to my website, PamelaDWilson.com, click on the Contact Me button, and complete my caregiver survey. I also invite you to join my online Facebook caregiver group. It's called the Caregiving Trap. Sometimes everyone feels that life is hard or impossible, and that things may never get easier. But somehow things change, and something that seemed impossible happens. In this episode of The Caring Generation, we're going to talk about caregivers feeling like they are just getting by. Do you ever wonder why life seems so difficult? As a caregiver for aging parents, grandparents, or a spouse, if you are raising children at the same time you are caring for elderly loved ones, you may simply feel exhausted. And if you're religious, you may be thinking, wow, is this how God wants me to feel? A lot of caregivers I know dream of having 5 minutes without somebody else around, or dream of taking a 10-hour nap. Stress levels can be off the chart, even though maybe you just indulged in a bag of potato chips or a big piece of chocolate cake that was supposed to make you feel better, and maybe it did for the 5 seconds you were eating it, right? But overall, you still feel just as stressed. How might caregivers know when they are on stress overload that does contribute to this feeling of barely getting by? The first way to notice is to try to remember the old you, the you before caregiving, the calm you, the peaceful you, the you that you miss and wish you could be once again. Were you super organized and now you can't find the pen that you just laid down somewhere? Did you forget to pay a bill even though it was on that list that you carry around with you? Have you gained weight, and because of this, you know it means you're stressed because the you before you had no weight issues at all, or even health issues to speak of? Are you distracted to such a level that this project that used to take you 15 minutes or an hour is still undone? You try to get started and something else takes you off track. Is your mind focused on choices that you regret or things you wish you'd done? The problem with barely getting by is that we can't live in what if. As caregivers, we have to live in what now if we want our situation to change. So when you feel frustrated, angry, lost, or hopeless, ask yourself, what can I do now, with the emphasis on now? What can I do now in this moment to make myself feel better? What can I do now in this moment to change my situation? What can I do now in this moment to lift my mood? Because all we have is now to impact our physical and mental state. Taking action equals movement. Movement equals motivation. So rather than saying stuck wherever you are, in front of a computer watching television, stuck in front of the washer and dryer, the kitchen sink, wherever you are, get up and move. And when you move, say to yourself, what can I do now to make myself feel better? If your mind goes to that place of doubt, keep repeating, what now? Until you're convinced that you can and you will do something different right now. The only way to get from feeling unhappy to happy is to take action right now. The next question to ask yourself after what now, if you're barely getting by, is what's the lesson? When we can look at life from a higher perspective, it may be easier to identify the next steps to take. Think of gaining a higher perspective as looking at another person's life, maybe one of your friends, and thinking of things that you might recommend to your friend that they could do to make their life easier or better based on information that they've given you. Or do you look at another person's life as genuinely amazing and wish that their life was your life? How do you get from here to there? We can all admit that sometimes behavior patterns repeat because we make the same choices. And we end up in exactly the same place, much to our surprise or our disappointment. Let's say that you're a caregiver and the person you care for makes you angry. And maybe they have a behavior pattern that just repeats and repeats and repeats, and it gets on your nerves, right? But part of the issue is that mom or dad or grandma, grandpa, your spouse, they do X. And you always respond in the same way. So, for example, mom or dad complains about the dinner that you made, and this makes you feel angry or resentful, but you don't say anything. Instead, you simmer like a pot of water waiting to boil over. And you simmer and simmer and simmer, and you get angry, and you relive this over and over again, and you're resentful. But what if instead of that simmering, which really is damaging for your health, you responded with something like, Mom or Dad, I'm so sorry you didn't like the hamburgers. Maybe next time you'd like to cook or help make the meal. You could even go so far as saying that you're deciding that you're going to take a night off from caregiving every week. And on that night, mom or dad or whoever you care for, they're on their own. And what a great opportunity this is for this person who complains about what you cook to cook something that they want to eat instead of relying on you all the time. So the next step is, in this moment, let this person that you care for know that it's time to get involved rather than you allowing a loved one to complain and praying that you can get by for one more day under these crazy circumstances. Caregivers can also feel like they're barely getting by because there's way too much to do. We've all been there. You wanted to be helpful and feel needed. So what did you do? You took the world's weight on your shoulders, and now you feel burdened, buried, and resentful. As you look at situations, really any situation in life, where you feel like you're barely getting by, ask yourself, what can I do today and in this moment? And what is the lesson? What did I do or what am I doing to contribute to this situation to make it worse? What steps must I take to move ahead, make different choices, better choices, feel better about what I'm doing, and less pressed for time and stress and everything else that makes me crazy? So in most cases, another action to take is to ask, What can I do for me? Many caregivers focus constantly on the needs of everyone else in their life. Your life is about what you can do for somebody else, not for you. Or maybe you had this goal to care for your aging parents or somebody else, and you succeeded wildly. You are the queen or king of caregivers. Nobody can equal what you do. You are better. You, like Superman, you jump 10 stories, you flip mattresses, you do everything. But in the end, that situation didn't work out exactly the way you expected. Now you have too much work, too much responsibility, and people who depend on you that really has become this heavy burden that's weighing you down. So your success plan, even though you did succeed, resulted in feeling today like you have this ball and chain around your ankle that you cannot escape. You're barely getting by because you're living life for somebody else, not yourself. So ask yourself, what can I do for myself right now? I can get up out of the house and I can take a drive. I can go for a walk. I can create a plan to get myself out of this situation. Think of possibilities instead of limitations. It's a fact. All caregiving situations have them. They all have limitations. But caregivers can become stuck in a lack versus a possibility mentality. Your aging parent or spouse may be unable to do more for themselves because of health problems, but what can they do? What can be done? I'll share a little secret with you. If you're not always around to be helpful, you will be surprised, even shocked, what your loved ones can do for themselves. Imagine if you had this camera in your house and you could watch what they do the minute you leave or while you're gone. You'd probably see them doing all kinds of things. But the problem is when you come home, they expect you to do it all. So unfortunately, all these things you have done to be this super caregiver have made your parents or spouse or grandparents or whoever you care for more reliant on you and less confident about their abilities. I know this might seem silly, even crazy, but it's not. You're taking away their opportunity to maintain their independence and their self-esteem. Think about alone time. How often have you had alone time and you looked forward to all those things you wanted to do because your space was your space and nobody was around to say a word? Did you binge watch a favorite television? Make yourself a big pot of spaghetti or something else you really like? Take a bubble bath. Play with the dog. There's a lot of freedom in having time alone. And just as you, the caregiver, would love to have some time yourself, in fact, you dream about it, that person you care for might also come to enjoy the same time alone, especially if you encourage parents, spouses, grandparents to be more proactive and independent so they're not so reliant on you. Now, some of this can feel like, oh, you've taken on all this stuff and you're just giving work back. So what? You might be returning a parent's confidence and self-esteem so that they feel that they can still do a little something for themselves. You can confirm that they don't have to be dependent on you for everything. Mom or Dad, don't wait for me to do this if you can do it yourself. Mom or Dad, feel free to fix yourself lunch. Don't wait for me. I know it's crazy, but I really suggest you give this a try and see what happens. This is another small thing that you can do to answer the question of what can I do for myself right now? Also on the same topic of getting alone time, what about hiring a caregiver to spend some time with your parent or a spouse so that they have the company of someone other than you? I know you're a great person, but think of how much you enjoy getting away from your parents and seeing a friend and leaving the house. So, a caregiver can visit your mom or dad and become a companion that they enjoy seeing. A caregiver can take your mom or dad out of the house, assuming that they're in relatively good physical condition. Think of this activity as a gift to the person you care for, of someone who hasn't heard their stories a million times, and someone who actually might look at them as a person they enjoy helping and being with, especially if you've become burned out and you have a sour, nasty mood. This is a different way of removing limitations that we all place on caregiving relationships because the caregiver thinks that they have to do everything and be everything. Change your perspective. Consider that doing everything is not good for you physically or emotionally. Of course, you probably already know this because you're barely getting by. But what you haven't considered is that maybe your doing has had a negative effect on the person that you care for and on you. And this is why maybe having some time to yourselves separately can make your caregiving relationship a little more bearable and less stressful. Ask the people you care for to do a little more for themselves so that you feel like you're getting a piece of your life back instead of barely getting by. Now, understandably, money may be limited because your parents are on a fixed income. Maybe they had to move in with you, and you think that you can't afford a paid caregiver. Remember, think possibilities, not limits. If this is the situation, then investigate opportunities to find a volunteer. Caregivers think I am out of my mind when I suggest volunteers. I will tell you, you will be surprised by the number of people who are interested in volunteering to spend time with older people because it adds to their life and it makes them feel good about helping other people. I know this because I have found amazing volunteers for my clients who needed support and companionship, and my clients did not have the money to pay a penny. These people exist. They are angels on earth. You just have to find them. So ask God or whoever you believe in or whatever you believe in to send you an angel and some help. If you don't ask, you don't get it. So when you look at why you are barely getting by, is part of the answer you are so burned out and exhausted that you can't or don't or refuse to think of other options to initiate meaningful change. You refuse to think of possibilities. You refuse to think, what now? What's the lesson? What can I do for myself in this moment? It's time to start being more selfish. Being selfish is okay. I had a caregiver this week who's in her 20s sweep the rest of her life under the rug because she moved her mother in her home to live with her. She said they don't get along. This caregiver complained that she never has time for herself, and she's getting married. Let's talk about looking at a situation that is a ticking time bomb. This caregiver said there was thought of moving mom into a community, but she knew what would happen. Mom would move and then complain all the time and not be happy. And my response to this caregiver was, well then, who needs an attitude adjustment and a little gratitude? In this case, it might be your mother for everything you've done for her up to this point. Mom should be ecstatic that you're getting married and getting on with your life. Your mom has lived her life. As a 20-something caregiver, you have your whole life ahead of you. Go live it and let your mom work on making her life the best she can today. If making this type of decision makes you feel guilty, check out my YouTube channel. It's at Pamela D Wilson, Caregiving Expert. There you will find hundreds of videos about dealing with caregiving guilt, making promises to parents, dealing with all kinds of caregiving topics, because in those videos I answer questions caregivers ask. So let's take a short break and we'll come back to discuss why caregivers say they are barely getting by. I'm Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. Visit my website, PamelaDWilson.com, to access my online caregiving program, How to Care for Aging Parents. Plus, over 160 episodes of this podcast, The Caring Generation. You'll also find my caregiving library and links to my online support group on Facebook called The Caregiving Trap. Stay with me. I'll be right back. This is Pamela D Wilson, Caregiving Expert. Visit my website, PamelaDWilson.com, for tips, support, articles, podcasts, online caregiver programs, and more. There's something for everyone at PamelaDWilson.com. We're back to think a little differently about reasons caregivers say they barely get by. In the first part of the program, we talked about aging parents' limitations, including physical abilities and money, and a couple of ideas to think differently about this. Now let's talk about the hours, days, weeks, years caregivers commit to caring for aging parents, spouses, and loved ones, which does translate to physical and mental exhaustion and health problems. If you're a caregiver, ask yourself this question: how would your life be different? Or what would you do differently if you got your life back? Now, this is truly a make-a-wish kind of dream. How many of you can answer this question? Or has it been too long since you dreamed that this might even be a possibility, so you have no answer? Here's the question: why isn't this possible? Why isn't it possible to get your life back? When you think of living life on your own terms, does your mind come up with this list of limitations about why it's not possible? If you can't imagine it happening, you can't make it happen. We all tell ourselves stories about why we can't do what we want. Oh, mom or dad or a spouse needs me. There's no money to pay for care. I don't have enough education. I'm not healthy enough to do that. That takes too much time. That looks like it's too hard. Well, the more excuses you make, the more excuses you are going to have. If money is a problem for caregiving, have you investigated Medicaid, home, and community-based services and long-term care to confirm that money is really a limitation? If it's something else, if there's another limitation, is there a way to get care for aging parents that you have not considered or researched? Have you overturned every single rock out there? Have you exhausted all of your options? How much time have you spent investigating it? I know you're going to say, Pamela, I don't have time. That's a limitation. No matter how complex your situation is, if you're barely getting by, if you're burned out, tired, exhausted, frustrating, finding a solution is up to you. Solutions exist for everything, but only for those brave enough to be persistent, to believe there's an answer out there, to ask questions, seek answers, and ask for help. Have you heard of the old saying, where there is a will, there is a way? It's true. I know, if you're barely getting by, you're exhausted, you tell me change is impossible. It is if you think it is. Your thoughts become your everyday reality. So until you're willing to change the way you think, your situation probably isn't going to change. Find the energy if you want to change your situation. And here's another question to ask. How often do you say, they won't let me do that. They won't like it if I do that. My mom won't like that. How often do you tell yourself when you share your story and in conversations and in your mind, right? But are you really projecting your feelings on another person? Is it you who won't let yourself do this? Or you who think that this can't be done? Because if you live in they world, if you give too much power over your life to another person or people, or to that part of your mind that says you can't do it, are you the limitation? Is the person you care for the problem? Or is it a person at work? Or is it you? If you want to stop barely getting by, you may have to go through a little discomfort to get to the other side. How comfortable are you having a conversation to state your needs? Making your needs known includes having a serious discussion with that person you care for, mom, dad, a spouse, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, about what you can and cannot continue to do, and even more, what you will and will not continue to do. You will continue to feel that you're barely getting by until you set a boundary, till you start saying no, until you recognize and stand up for your needs. You're never going to stretch yourself to get what you want from life and to make one or more of your dreams come true. What are you waiting for? Why should young caregivers with a long life ahead of them give up the best years of their life to care for aging parents? Now, I know many caregivers who say they wouldn't do things differently. Many years ago, I even thought about moving across country to care for a favorite aunt and uncle. And this would have been about the time I wanted to go to college. And I didn't make the move, but I really did think about it. But most family caregivers have no idea of what caregiving truly means and the effect on their lives, short and long term. They throw their lives upside down until they get to that point where they don't recognize who they are. They're barely getting by. They don't know how to dig themselves out of the quicksand that you have sunken into. To stop barely getting by, you have to make some space in your life. You have to take time away from caregiving to give your body and your brain time to rest so that solutions will begin coming to you. Caregivers who keep going and going and going and barely get by are working against themselves because they're exposing themselves to constant stress. Even athletes who train constantly need a break. So let's talk about dealing with the healthcare system. We haven't talked about that yet, right? Insurance companies, doctors, healthcare providers. That can be a real drain on caregivers' time and their lives. Honestly, there have been times when I spent 30 minutes, an hour on the phone trying to return a person's call from a doctor's office. And every time I called, I'd be transferred. The phone line got disconnected, right? And every time I called back, I had to go through the same routine. Who are you calling for? Are you returning a call? What's the date of birth? What's your name? People asking me the same questions repeatedly so they could just disconnect me on the phone. And I would never get to the person that I needed to talk to. That frustration alone can result in a caregiver giving up trying to schedule a doctor's appointment or get a treatment for a loved one. And then what happens? Something bad. And I can tell you, the people on the other line, they don't care. Their only job is to answer the phone. They don't care if they actually get you to somebody who you want to talk to. It's not their problem to resolve their problem. So, once again, more frustrations to add to the list for caregivers barely getting by. What can you do? Ask yourself that question. What can I do for me? In this case, if you have a sibling or somebody in your family or a friend who can help you make phone calls or schedule appointments or do anything, asking for their help is what you can do for you. I know you don't want to do that, but if you don't, you will constantly barely be getting by. So if this is a case, there may be a time when you have to be brave enough to upset the apple cart. And as we talked about earlier, this might involve initiating a conversation with the person you care for, that while you love them dearly, you cannot, will not do this alone anymore or at all. Let them know that you're going to ask your siblings or other people for help or find other options for help. And if none of this works, then maybe a care community may be the next point of discussion. Of course, now, if you have siblings involved, it's possible that your siblings are not going to take you seriously. They are going to expect you to cave into pressure when they say, I'm too busy. I have a job. I'm raising children. All the while you're dreaming of being in the same position as your siblings who are busy working and raising children because you have given up years of your life to care for this person, mom or dad, spouse. So the question for siblings or even your children, if you're a spousal caregiver, is how can they help you care for this person? Because you may not be able to go on doing this. What happens if you died tomorrow? What would happen? Who would step in? So you have to be willing to walk away as the caregiver when you make the statement saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm not willing to do this anymore. But you can't remain involved and you can't control the situation. Because I tell you, when siblings or somebody else takes over, you are going to feel unneeded and unappreciated. So you have to prepare for this feeling because having others take over can make you feel resentful. It's almost as if everything you did to this point over the past 5 years, 10 years, it no longer makes a difference. It doesn't matter. So as we talked about, you're having the opportunity to create a make-a-wish opportunity Focus on the positive and the future and your life. Ask yourself again, how would your life be different, or what would you do differently if you got your life back? If that time is now, or when this time arrives, it's going to scare the out of you. So you have to be prepared, because at this point, the focus is solely on you and what you want from life. You're not worrying about anybody else. You need to figure out how to make your life happen. So remember that saying, be careful what you ask for, you might get it. Well, every caregiver dreams of this moment. When it comes, you have to know what you're going to do next. So similar to barely getting by because you've got too many caregiving responsibilities, caregivers can barely be getting by because now they have too many choices. They have to make choices. That structure and the routine of caregiving activity has disappeared from your life. And if you don't have a plan, you are going to struggle. So what are you going to do now? All those things you dreamed about. Write them down. Think of this as kind of like semi-retiring, even though you may still have a job and work. So for those of you who are retired, what was it like trying to reestablish a new routine? It's kind of like creating a new life because your work friends are still working and you're the one who has time on your hands. So you need to make new friends and find new social activities. So take a step back while you're still in the throes of caregiving and barely getting by, and make an exit plan. Write it out to have other people take over your caregiving responsibilities and what you're going to do after you no longer are doing everything you're doing today. Now, think about this, though. It's not as if caregiving responsibilities won't eventually return to your life. So if you care for aging parents and you're married, one day you may care for your spouse or yourself. So everything you are learning this time around has a lot of value. All you're trying to do is find this little window of time for you to take a break and get your life back, get your health back. Because barely getting by as a caregiver can also be an excuse not to deal with your own demons, your problems, insecurities, doubts, and fears, and learn how to take care of yourself. Life can get really comfortable for caregivers who put all their efforts and focus into caring for another person to the exclusion of taking care of themselves. But eventually one day, that caregiver may look back and realize, wow, what did I give up? But it may be too late. You as the caregiver may now have health problems and limitations, and you're seeing that your life has passed you by. You can't go back and start a career all over again. You don't have skills anymore. So now all that remains is to think about what might have been. So the choice is that where you want to find yourself? Or do you want to get on with life and create your next path? Every day has 24 hours. Time passes quickly. If we don't make the best of the time we have every day by having some kind of plan, then 6 months or 6 years down the road, we may be that person who looks back with regret. A lot of caregivers are going to hear this, all of this, and you're going to think, oh, it's impossible, Pamela, you're crazy. Remember, if you think it's impossible, it is impossible for you. But change is not impossible for those people over there who want to stop barely getting by. And they're willing to take an honest look at limitations and change these to opportunities, to discuss what they can do, to develop a plan about what they can do, so that loved ones can still receive care, but just not from this caregiver. So I encourage all of you, find your inner strength, your hope, your courage. Talk to your angels in the face of doubt so that you can move from barely getting by to being more in control of your life while you still can maintain a relationship with that person that you care for. Being a caregiver doesn't mean you have to give up everything in your life. It means that you care enough about yourself. You are a caregiver for yourself, and you're a caregiver for others. And your goal is to find a middle ground that works for everybody so that nobody is giving up everything. I thank you all for continuing to pose questions for this podcast and the videos I share on my YouTube channel. If you're looking for answers to caregiving and aging questions, again, visit my website, PamelaDWilson.com. There is so much information there. my caregiving library, my Caring for Aging Parents online program, my book, The Caregiving Trap. A lot of helpful information that takes you through the A to Z of caring for elderly parents and yourself. You can also go to my Facebook page and my caregiver group called The Caregiving Trap and join there. This is Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert on the caring generation. I look forward to being with you all again soon. God bless you all, sending love and light to everyone. Sleep well tonight. Have a fabulous day tomorrow and make the best of each day until we are here together again.
Tune in each week for The Caring Generation with host Pamela D. Wilson. Come join the conversation and see how Pamela can provide solutions and peace of mind for everyone. Here on Pamela D. Wilson's The Caring Generation.